Feel free to on your mic.
No offer, maybe.
Yeah.
All right. Where do we start? I'm excited by our guest today, and and the conversation that we intend, to have on this episode, of the podcast. Um, I don't know how to explain him, but he got a very interesting, personality, and I guess that those who listen to us would find out, over the course of the conversation. Yeah, so we have in midst today, Comrade Offiong Aqua, who's a professor and works, in the United States. But what's interesting for me, the most is, his history, from his days as a student in the University of Calabar, as a radical student, that is, and his time in the university, in the old Soviet Union, as both a student, yes, and as a professional. So I don't know. Without saying too much, let's hear him, say a few words about who he is. I don't think I can exhaust that.
All right, Emeka, thank you so much, and I guess I should also say hello to your audience. My name is Offiong Aqua. I grew up. I consider myself as someone who grew up all through with Nigerian history. I grew up in Lagos. My parents were senior civil servants. I was there. In fact, we were essentially, all of our stuff was packed from Ikoyi and deposited in Ore. That's how we were kicked out of Lagos because of the Civil War. So
Wow.
I consider myself really a student. My father, as a senior civil servant, attended Aburi. So as a kid, I had started having this consciousness. I was in Lagos. I saw Wea Tie during the Western Region days. I saw Awolowo with incredible free education. I saw people sitting under trees in Lagos and people were laughing at them, but that free education succeeded. All of that I saw. And then, of course, I then went to Unical, where I was lucky. I'm a pioneer student of University of Calabar, but I was lucky. I came into the university at the same time a whole group of radical professors arrived. Escotoyo was there before. It's actually AD and Ben Madunagu who essentially came into the university the same period, maybe the same year even, like in terms of when we all arrived there. So I obviously did not graduate. I was a pre-med student. We're going to be the first students, pioneer students of the medical school there. But I was involved in Ali Must Go, which was a student strike calling for free education and democracy. In a military regime, we were harassed, we were arrested, we had all kinds of issues. I personally escaped from Nigeria because attempts were made on my life. I escaped through the democracy routes that people like Professor Willow Shenka later on took, and Nadeko people use that route. We used that route. So I went overseas, went to Soviet Union, where I studied there. I went to medical school there. I worked there as a doctor, as a matter of fact, and did some of my specialist training there. So that is, to make it brief, the arc of my life.
Thank you very much for that. And actually, we'll come back to a lot of the themes that you've raised in that introduction, because, many of them are themes that we've covered before on the podcast, and our listeners will be familiar with some of the names you've mentioned, including Escotoyo and Edwin Madunagu. But actually, to begin from that point, and then work our way back to some of the larger questions that we hope to discuss, we wanted to first kind of explore a bit your relationship with the Madunagus and perhaps with socialist groupings in Calabar. For instance, the Calabar group of socialists. Were these folks that you encountered in the course of your study and afterwards? And yeah, I mean, how would you describe that kind of milieu in Calabar from your perspective?
Yes, so we have, obviously, I have both a comrade relationship and, of course, a friend relationship. Comrades invariably become very close and tight friends. So I met him as a student leader, or we met when I was organizing to run for the student union presidency. And so if you don't mind, there's some things I cannot say. For example, I will give you an example. There were things, I was very active. I think I consider myself still active. In those days, for me, it was not enough to talk about the military regime. I'm going to be honest with you. In my head, we used to think like, let's overthrow this military regime and install a socialist government. As a matter of fact, at one time, we did something, which I'm not going to talk about. All I'm going to say to you is that I met them as a kid. I had started reading Hegel. I had read Marx on my own. I had read Lenin. I talked about Che Guevara. So I was obviously not necessarily articulate with this stuff. But when I met them, we were able to reduce it to our lives there. We're able to reduce it, for example, to the fact that our university was controlled by people who were not interested in basically the welfare of the masses of that part of the country and the country in general. And we could see that from their policies. So we went after that. That is why I contested for student union presidency. So that's when we met. That's when my relationship with them started. It's been a long relationship. They've been very good to me. If I remember when I was leaving, Escotoyo, who was a poor lecturer, called me and gave me $50. I would never forget it until I die. And he gave me in dollars, by the way. So these are people who have been very close to me. I sit here in New York, and Bene Madunagu, who was running an NGO, the Girls Power thing, invites me to chair an event in Calabar. And I'm co-chairman with Adeola. I think that's the guy who started PHB Bank or something, one of those people. So they honor me. We are close. I speak with them very frequently. And in fact, there was a time I wanted to run for Senate in Akwa Ibom. And Eddie Madunagu made sure that the whole of Guardian newspaper, I was giving interviews anyhow in Guardian. In those days, when you give interview, they ask for a bribe. Nobody asked me for a bribe. They just featured me. So I'm just saying that in general, these people we are very close till today.
Great. No, thank you. That's quite interesting. And, particularly enjoyed those snippets from, campus life, back in those days, dangerously opposing military rule. And actually, that's kind of where I thought to go next with our conversation. So you mentioned Ali Must Go already in the intro. And this is a subject that has interested us to no end on the show, and it's one where we actually hope to come back and do a specific episode around. But having you here, we thought we'd get your perspective a bit about the context of Ali Must Go and how it was organized. So I guess in terms of direct questions, why did it happen? And then what role did you play? How did you end up being absorbed into the whole thing?
Okay, so I became president of Students Union. I'm the pioneer president of the University Students Union. When I was elected president of Students Union, that was the time Obasanjo, who was then head of state, was preparing to hand over power to civilians. So there was a constitutional drafting committee headed by the late Justice Udo Udoma. That committee was a committee that was supposed to prepare the country for the Second Republic that came in 1979, I believe. So at that time, we as students, we were nominated. Our national president, Segun Okewo, who passed away recently. Segun Okewo was the national president. And so because of that, he was made a member of the Constituent Assembly that wrote that constitution. By the way, that's part of the constitution that Abdul Salam Abubakar was using to formulate this new constitution we are running in Nigeria today after the death of Sani Abacha. So that constitution, we participated when they nominated us. So we're a member of Constituent Assembly. As a matter of fact, they gave the 3 of us residencies in Satellite Village. I came to Lagos. So anytime Shegun went into the Constituent Assembly. Of course, we're interested in education. We insisted on free education be written into the Constitution. So we insisted on stuff that most student leaders in the countries were leftist leaders anyway. So it was not that complicated for us. So,
and I should say, by the way, that this was 1977 already, or
this
were we
was
already in
77.
Okay.
It was 78 actually.
Okay.
So we were already in 78. Now, during this whole time, every month, because they were talking about democracy. By the way, this was actually started by Murtala Mohammed. Since there was no civil participation in government, so every student leader, we were 12. There were 12 universities in Nigeria then. There were 12 of us. Every single month, they flew us to Dodan Barracks. At that time, they had not moved to Abuja yet. They flew us to Dodan Barracks, and we sat with Yaradua, who is the brother of the late president. Yaradua was a soldier. He had been he was a member. I think he was a member. He was the head of the Supreme. He was number 2 to Obasanjo. So Yaradua will sit for us every single month, and on every national issue, we'll go over it. On this, we'll go by it. They asked us governance. We said we wanted a socialist governance. We wanted, in fact, we gave them our opinion. They asked us. So on one of the occasions, this meeting was once every month. On one of the occasions, Yaradua asked us, he said, we are going to raise education. We are going to introduce school fees. When I was a student in Nigeria, there was no school fees in the university. In fact, I will tell you, in Unical, where I was student union president, so we didn't have school fees, but you have to pay for your food. So we used to have what was called meal tickets. I still remember those meal tickets were 25 kobo a meal. So I come to the dining room, and the students standing outside because some of them could not afford the 25 kobo. I shut University of Calabar down, and we insisted if they don't allow everybody to eat, because Nigeria was enjoying an oil boom. And I can tell you that there was nobody, student in Unical, who did not eat, whether they had meal ticket or not. It's one of the things I'm proud of till today. So this was the kind of situation we found ourselves in. So there was no school fees, and Yaradua says to us, "We are going to introduce school fees." We're like, "What? School fees?" With all these corrupt contractors, money was flowing in Nigeria in those days, and we're like, "We're not going to accept it." So he said, "Well, it's not me, it's Obasanjo." We're like, "Well, we are not going to accept it." So we called a meeting in University of Ilorin, where we then called that strike. That strike was that we will not accept introduction of school fees in Nigeria under any circumstance. Any student who deserves to be in a university should be able to go to university free. So, which we were already doing until they brought this new stuff. So we had that meeting, and I then essentially asked them to come to Calabar. It is in University of Calabar that I move a motion for this, and we declared Ali must go in Unical. In fact, that day they carried us on BBC, I remember.
And who was Ali? I hope I didn't miss this already.
Okay. Sorry. Ali, by the way, Ali just died. I think Ali died like a year and a half ago or 2 years ago. So
Ali has gone actually at this stage.
I know, right? So Ali was a guy. His name is Colonel Amadou Ali.
Okay.
Colonel Amadou Ali was a member of the military junta in Nigeria, and he was the Minister of Education. So he was in charge of us, in charge of our schools. By the way, that Ali later became chairman of PDP under Obasanjo. The same Amadou Ali became chairman of PDP under Obasanjo. So he was a minister, he was a soldier, who was in fact, Ali said to us that we should be proud that we even have universities in Nigeria. We had a lot of exchanges with them. So we asked for him to leave. Ali must go meant we wanted him to resign, that we will shut down our schools, we will not go back to school until Ali resigned. So that's how Ali must go.
Very interesting. Just one quick follow-up. We agreed to hold these to the end, but I just wanted to give the audience a little bit of a sense of how widespread the protests were. So was Ali Must Go something that was organized across multiple campuses? And how were you communicating with the various other branches of the movement, if so?
Okay, so let me just give you an interesting tidbit. When we wanted to organize, all of the student leaders in all the universities, 12 universities in the country, we agreed that we're going to carry out this action. We mapped out how everything was going to be. As you can imagine, communication was hard in those days. We had to use phones. In fact, the phones I used was from Unical. I used Unical phones without our Vice Chancellor realizing that I'm using those phones to organize these things. So, but when we had a meeting to do it, we wanted to make sure, number one, every single Nigerian university did it. Because I saw NSAS now, and NSAS seem to be more focused on one part of the country than the other. I'm not saying people didn't do it in other places, but we did not want that. So we insisted that every single part of our country did it. When we insisted on that, the guy who was president of the University of Nigeria, Nsukka, who, by the way, just finished serving as a member of the Federal House, Chudi, said, well, that he will not be able, a few years after the Civil War, have Igbo come out and essentially oppose the government. And we're like, that's bullshit. And we fought against it bitterly, up to the point where I went to Enugu and Shegun and Femi Olufagba. So we went to Enugu to meet with Mwobodo, Jim Mwobodo, who at that time was the head of Rangers Football Club. He was a very popular guy. We went there and we met with him. We said, this is wrong. We cannot do any demonstration if Nsukka does not join. So as I was saying, you can hear me, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So we made sure that we're able to do it as students from all parts of the country, every single part of the country, because of our efforts, right? There were people who thought, oh, well, we said, no, Nigeria is all of us. We must do it together. And we were able to do it together. In fact, if you go and look at the lecturers and people who were fired because of our action, you had Professor Ishaya Audu, who was Vice Chancellor of Ahmadu Bello. He was sacked by Obasanjo because they felt he encouraged us, which I can say today he did encourage us, right? So you have to like that. You have, of course, the rest of these people like Olaoni. That's how Olaoni lost his job. Olaoni was fired based on Ali Must Go, Olaoni, Bode Onimode. All of these people, Edi Madunagu and the wife, were fired and kicked out of their residences, by the way. So you had it was a national thing. Yep.
So it sounds like one of the major, if unfortunate, outcomes of the protest was this was one moment when a lot of the left was purged from the academy. Okay. And I mean, would you say that there were other lasting, actually, maybe I'll pose this as a two-sided question. Would you say that there were other lasting impacts of the Ali Must Go protest on Nigerian politics or the student movement in general? And then the final one from me before I hand off would be, would you say that there was a sort of underlying ideology that was guiding the student movement at that point in history? And if so, do you think that's remained the case? So yeah, sorry, I guess those are three questions in one, but yeah, it's kind of around what do you think were the wider impacts beyond the purging of the left, and then what were the sort of ideology both at the moment and what might be the legacy of that ideological imprint, if there was any?
Okay, yes, there was an ideology. Clearly, it was socialist ideology. We had a vision for the country, and we actually wanted the country to listen to us, and we felt that Nigeria was going the wrong way. We felt that the capitalist way Nigeria was going would only result on all these greedy contractors who were driving expensive cars all over the place. So there was an ideology. In fact, I will say this to you, that every single election of president of students' unions in the country, we all had our comrades everywhere. And that enabled us to win most of the elections because we had our comrades there. We had cells in all these universities, as you can imagine. I mean, for example, I remember being taken to go and meet Professor Bala Usman. I don't know whether you guys are familiar with Bala Usman, who was head of the Department of Political Science in Ahmadu Bello. That's how I went. I met him in Kano as a kid in those days. So there was a coordination between us and the non-student left. we worked together. From the first minute we came, we introduced ourselves to each other, we knew each other, we worked together. As far as the impact, though, when you come to the impact, I think the impact is more of a negative impact. Because, for example, I see today, right? I see today, for us, think about this. We were fine, everything, the school, our schools were incredible schools. All those universities were well equipped. They had faculty. I mean, I had faculty from Grenada, from Jamaica, from South Africa. These were great institutions of learning. So even though we had all of this, all we were complaining about was just that school fees thing. I don't know whether students can do it these days. I come to Nigeria a lot. In fact, up until 2017, I was spending 6 months of a year. Between 2007 and 2017, I was spending 6 months every year in Nigeria. And I could tell that the students, they don't have the kind of influence that we had in those days. I think it's a negative impact. In fact, because of us, I think after us, the government finally destroyed the student unions. So that's how I feel. So my feeling is that our impact, unfortunately, was kind of negative. Because think about this. If in those days, that was what we're fighting for, think about Nigerian universities today. It's really unfortunate. But there was no momentum in terms of what we did those days that carried over to any kind of improvement in education, for example, and other things. I mean, we had, as you can imagine, we had like 1,000 demands, but it was really the education part that was the highlight of what we're trying to do.
That was really interesting, and even I'll say action, kind of action packed, because from your experience and what you were saying, one would wonder if there could be a repetition of what you've just laid out for us, as young people and even as students that are even in school now. And you mentioned...
You don't mind if I mention something quickly on that? I just remember.
Please do.
So I remember that I came to, because you can imagine me coming to visit, I'm excited about seeing student leaders, and I invited student leaders in Uyo. I invited them to my place. I was so excited. I was like, wow, let me meet these student leaders. We have things in common. And they arrived for a meeting with me. I see this thing is stuck in my head. And they arrived there, and I talked to them. I talked to them about the past, and they all listened. When I finished, they were like, please, Professor, will you give us transportation? Now, I hope you understand that for me, because I've done some politics in Akwa Ibom, transportation is associated in the corrupt political system in Nigeria. Transportation is really a bribe thing that give me money. So I said, okay, you know what? Let me arrange for transport to take you back. They say, no, be so now that the cash. It is money. And for me, I felt so bad because as a student leader in University of Calabar, I had 3 vehicles, 3 from the Students' Union. I had 2 drivers. We did not need to beg anybody. We were independent. And it seems as if that is not there today. In fact, I remember looking at the student leaders and thinking, wow, even when I had a chat with them, I was surprised that in their head, they were more interested in whether I know the governor. That seemed to be more, I did not see any initiative on their part in terms of their role in society. As a driving force, I did not see it.
That's, a testament to how our society has kind of sunk, and it's kind of sad to see that this is what has become of, many of the movements that we have around, and it's just sad. But anyway, you mentioned that in the earlier part of this conversation that you resumed your education in the Soviet Union. Why did you end up in the Soviet Union, as to say, opposed to maybe America, where you currently reside? And what was the experience like, since you witnessed the dissolution of the Soviet Union, around that point, that time?
Yeah, so again, you see another difference between today's Nigeria and the Nigeria of that time. When I was expelled, 5 of us were expelled from the university. When 5 of us were expelled by Obasanjo, University of Ife, Wole Soyinka hosted us in University of Ife, and the students in University of Ife donated money. They gave us 6,000 naira each at the time. 6,000 in a very public event, 6,000 naira would be equivalent of, I don't know, $18,000 today. So
What year?
1978, 79.
Oh, really?
6,500 naira were given to every single 5 of us who were kicked out of school. Number one, by the students of University of Ife. In fact, we went there, we spent the night in Bolesho Inka's house in University of Ife then. So that is one. Secondly, all the professors, a lot of our comrades who were professors all over the country, they were calling overseas, trying to see how to get us to schools. I had admission to a university in Canada. I had admission, to Leipzig University, which was part of Eastern Germany then. By the way, that's the university that the late Dr. Chuba Okadibo attended.
Oh, okay.
People were ready to help us. I was offered admission, and these are from professors, comrades. Some of them I've never met. They were like, no, we can't allow the government defeat us. We have to look for a way to get you out of here so that you can go to school overseas. When I went to the Canadian embassy, they refused to give me a visa. They said, well, the Nigerian government, I was on what was called a wanted list. In fact, I'll tell you, before then, 3 of us were going to attend a youth conference in Havana, Cuba. Wow. This is a government-sponsored youth conference. And I remember going to this is after I was expelled. During that period, I was just waiting to go back to school. And because we were the members of the youth movement too. So the 3 of us went to the airport and they seized my passport. That is when I realized I would not be allowed to leave Nigeria. So, but now I go to these embassies. So they also told the embassies to block us. All the embassies blocked us except the embassy of the United Soviet Socialist Republic. I went to the USSR embassy. Not only did they give me a visa, they gave me a ticket and they gave me food too, right? They were so excited to see us and to see me. So that is how I went to the former Soviet Union instead of these other schools. In fact, when I arrived in Moscow, after a year, the other schools that wanted me still wanted me, but I didn't want to leave. I fell in love with Moscow, and my parents were very angry. They were like, you stay right there till the end. And I did. So,
in the thick of the Cold War.
Yeah. That's correct. In the peak of Cold War, which is interesting because I can tell you, as students, we had lots of Nigerians there. In fact, some of them are what you call big men in Nigeria today. So in the peak of the Cold War, during vacation, for example, when we traveled to Western Europe, when other Nigerian students were there, we were surprised at how badly they were living. I remember going to London and you have to put money to get hot water to bath. When I was in Moscow, hot water was free for every single person, no matter who you are. I lived far better in Moscow in those days than Nigerian students were living in Western Europe. I didn't work, obviously. Nobody in Soviet Union worked a day in their lives. None of us. The only work I did there was as a medical doctor when I graduated.
So you say the experience is it's a stark difference between the East and West to me.
Very sharp. I'll be honest, the way they received us was different from the way the Western Europeans received Nigerian students.
Okay, so we're going to try to come to the more contemporary issues now. We've been doing some background research, and let's say around 2015 we saw some videos about you advocating for ethnic minorities. Has this position been influenced by maybe your time in the USSR? And do you feel like the experience of the Soviet republics, have affirmed your commitment to agitations for ethnic self-determination?
Yes, that experience was a real experience. And you can imagine, I was a student, but I was a student who came from the Calabar cell, the socialist cell. So for me, it was more than just studying. I joined so many groups in South Africa. When I was there, in fact, we had a socialist group. The head, Lucky, who later became the first chief of staff to Nelson Mandela. We had all these people. All we talked about was how to take socialism back to our countries. That was really what was I experienced there. However, we also spent a lot of time critiquing the Soviet Union. We were disappointed. We're disappointed that, wow, because you have to understand, Soviet Union was essentially the most successful socialist experiment in history. I mean, it was a whole country. It was a superpower. It had gone to space. It was the first country to go to space. It had all these achievements. And when you go there, the academics were immense. The academic achievements there were immense, especially in the sciences. Now, and then here we are, an ideology we sympathize with. The Russians hated the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. And that it broke our hearts. But the thing is, we saw it happening. And we noticed that the problem was, in fact, I remember we Nigerians saying, which kind of tribalism is this now? Because we were not like that. We were not like that at all. But here we are, where our own classmates are telling us about the ethnic problems they have. And even some of them, like people from the Baltics, they wanted self-determination. They were like, we don't want to be part of the Soviet Union. We don't have to be part of the Soviet Union. We could still be socialists. These are leftists. It's just that they did not want to be part of that country anymore. They had their grievances. And look, everybody has grievances, right? Nobody's perfect. In the US, I live here. Every morning I wake up, the Black people here are crying. However, the big difference is that in the Soviet Union, they refused pointedly to address this matter. To them, it was an ideological crime to even say, look at people from Kazakhstan who are Muslims are complaining that they have been shoved out of the Communist Party, that when they bring up their own religion, they're told to shut it up. So that seriously disappointed us. Now, I lived there for 10 years. So I lived there for a very long time. So I saw that whole thing. And I remember thinking, talk to these people, because I had sympathy for the Soviet Union already. But it did not happen. I then noticed that what happened was that the leadership of the Soviet Union in the Politburo and the Central Committee of the Communist Party were more interested in talking about ideology and holding on to power. They were less interested in addressing, look, they had achieved a lot, don't get me wrong. The free education they have there is still there till today. The free healthcare they had before then is still there. So I'm not dismissing the achievements of the Soviet Union. What bothered us was the lack of democracy. There was zero democracy. The only democracy is like among the Politburo, if you call that democracy. That part we felt we did not support because it led to people being bitter in the country. It led to all this, it led to the country breaking up. If you remember, during that period, there was a talk that Soviet Union was communist or socialist, and then there was a clash between communism and capitalism. When we lived there, we didn't see that clash. We saw a clash between Armenians and Russians. The clash we saw there, which is why the place did not broke up into people who like communism or people who like capitalism. It broke up along ethnic lines. And I'm still bothered that the world does not want to examine that. Why? I can get it. The Soviet Union broke up because some reactionaries did not want to be part of it. No, it broke up along ethnic lines. That has informed me. And by the way, even then, I was still not convinced. I still was going to Nigeria. I took a year from my job to go and contest for Senate elections. I believed in 1999. I thought we had a shot. I thought we had a chance. It is when at some point let's just say that my experience, it looked the same to me suddenly. And I thought, no, I'm not going to spend the rest of my life just talking about stuff, going to meetings and talking about things that I needed to look for something to do, even if it's for 3 people. And my thinking in my head is, hey, if we succeed in what we're doing, maybe others will follow. Maybe others will say, okay, this is the example here. So I kind of want to give you a rough background of why I did what I did.
Yeah, that's it'll be interesting to examine this for like our own society, using like the theoretical background that we have to, see how class lines, tribal lines, how to even come up with a theory that can solve our own problem, But to come to more recent issues, that's been making the rounds on the news, the Russian invasion of Ukraine. What do you make of that? And then what lessons do you think other African nations can hold and grasp from what's going on currently?
Yes,
no pressure.
Yes. As you can imagine, of course, I've been contacted by a lot of people. I've actually been on Zoom where people wanted to hear what I think about this. I'll say this. For me, I'm sitting here. I am so disappointed. I just feel so bad. Even though I'm not surprised, the Ukrainians would have been equivalent of people who are asking for Biafra in Nigeria today. The Ukrainians never wanted to be part of the Soviet Union. I don't know whether you're aware of this, that during the Second World War, during Operation Barbarossa, when Hitler came into the Soviet Union, the one place where he received support was from Ukraine. But that's because the Ukrainian masses felt oppressed by Stalin. That's the reason. But people were able to twist it into an ethnic thing. So it became like, but the Ukrainians just did not support. They betrayed their own country during that period. So when the war ended, to make peace, the Communist Party decided to appoint Nikita Khrushchev, to be the head of state. Khrushchev, by the way, is an Ukrainian, right? Have you noticed that in Nigeria, when the ethnic differences, why not appoint like an Igbo to run the place to show Igbos that this is, no. But Nigeria acts in the opposite direction. Here, the Communist Party decided that, hey, let's have an Ukrainian there. And this was Khrushchev, who, by the way, was not a great guy himself either. But the point remains, that was the reaction to that. So what is going on today, to me, it is Ukrainians who have demanded self-emancipation forever. If this was granted to them, because what is it? Grant it to them. They could almost say, okay, want to be part of Soviet Union again. But when you deny it, it lingered. Even when the Soviet Union broke up, and that part of Soviet Union broke up, the problem is that you had Russians in that part of Soviet Union. And what created, in that part of Ukraine, what created the crisis today is that an Ukrainian won an election, a free and fair election, and was elected. A Russian won an election in Ukraine. So some nationalist groups in Ukraine were very angry, and they pushed him out. I don't know whether you've heard of the Maidan Revolution. The Maidan Revolution was a revolution.
2014 election and
people
then
stood
afterwards, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. People stood up and essentially toppled the civilian government and the guy ran away. I think he's on exile somewhere in Russia. That angered the Russian minorities. It angered Russian minorities. As I'm talking to you today, so you should understand the dilemma where I am, where for me, I really feel that all sides are right in this fight. I have a classmate of mine who is Director General of the Foreign Ministry of Russia. I have a classmate of mine who is Dean of one of the largest medical schools in Ukraine. That school has been leveled in Donetsk by Russians. Yeah. I have a classmate of mine who is number 3 in the newly recognized by Russia of Donetsk People's Republic. I have a lot of people involved in this fight. And if you ask me, all of them sound right to me. The Russians should not invade the place. Yes. Ukrainians should not have, Ukrainians should have taken care of this issue, that if you push somebody out on an ethnic basis, you create a problem that the country will never be able to solve. And that was the thing that happened. So to me, you have all of these things going on together. If you ask me, if you ask my opinion is that, because it will be almost impossible now, because really the Russian part of Ukraine don't want to be in Russia again. This is what is really going on. I can see the Ukrainian not wanting to lose territory, but I feel that why endanger people's lives? But I can also see Russia should never have invaded the place in the first place. So all of these thoughts are in my head. If you have a specific question, I can answer, but I can tell you maybe it's because you can almost accuse me of being sentimental, because I know everybody on both sides of this fight, on both sides.
Yeah, but okay, what of African nations now, Liam? Let's you come home to that. What can we learn from this? What are the things that are pertinent to our own issues, from this crisis or this scenario on ground?
Yeah, I think I feel that a lot of African countries are powder kegs. I feel so. A few are not. I did not live there. I went to work there. New York University, where I work, we have a campus in Accra, in Ghana. That is why I saw a difference. I've been to a few African countries, but a lot of African countries have these ethnic differences. And my thinking is, why not just sit down and talk about it? After all, you could always say, hey, you know what? Let's look for something that all of us can live with and remain who we are. But the fear by everybody is don't even introduce the topic. Well, that's what is happening in Ukraine today. The issue is not economic development. You cannot have economic development. You cannot have political, you cannot have economic development, social cohesion without resolving political issues as they arise. For example, when I went to Russia in 1979, as a Nigerian, we didn't have those issues. It was just not there. So you couldn't tell me what was there to solve. We're all Nigerians. We all love Nigeria the way Nigeria was. I left the Shagari government, which to me, even though it was a bourgeois government, the point still remains it was a Nigerian government. Today, some people don't feel like that. And to me, it's not Nigeria alone. Go to Cameroon, for example. I could go down the list. I have colleagues who are Cameroonians. I have colleagues, professors here, who have formed a separatist organization, Ambazonia. And they're killing their people there. What is going on? Why can't you just, is it by force? I mean, Czech decided they don't want to be Slovakia, let them go. And this theory that, well, you know, if you let them go, if you let corruption will happen there, who cares? Let corruption happen there. But why let people die? That is my main thing. I feel we need more democracy in Africa, more people openly, more of us being sensitive to how people think and trying to solve it. How hard is it? Why is it then that when you have Nigerians come here, the university where I work, I have a Nigerian, Professor Ogedegbe, who is able to resolve very complicated issues between ethnic groups. So he finds it easy to do it here in New York, but he can't do it in Nigeria. So why can't we sit down? If we take that away, it will be easy. I will tell you that myself, because I am very, very in tune with my village, my relatives, where my parents were born in Nigeria. When I go to them, they say to me, we don't want to hear big English about socialism. We want to hear why we are cheated. That's what they want to hear. So I cannot say to them, no, let's talk Marxism first. Because in their brain, why is that Marxism not able to be used to help us though? Right? Why is it that you just talk? We need help, and we don't need help next year. We don't need help 10 years from now. We need help now. And they feel that they have been skimmed out. So it is my responsibility as a political leader to talk to them about it. I can't just say, well, don't worry, I have comrades that you are now saying are cheating. I know my comrades are not doing anything to anybody, but that thinking in people needs to be talked about. It needs to be resolved. Until we can get there, I think we just continue the way we're doing.
That's interesting. It's interesting that the order of the day and what we have, it's not even allowing, the ruling class are not even allowing or coming to the table to listen to people and also try to resolve the differences and try to create a society that's equitable for us to even have some sort of development in the country. But this is just a testament to the bourgeois and backward type of leadership that we have.
Absolutely, because OAG, I hope you know, if there was an accommodation reached, if any accommodation was reached, do you think Atiku Abubakar will be able to talk about zoning? No zoning. Do you think Tinubu will say that, it's the turn of the Yorubas? I mean, it irritates me when I see all of this. And that's the problem. As you said, the bourgeoisie, they use it to maintain power. And they expect us, the left, not to say a word. Remember, the left, we're not supposed to talk about tribalism, right? We're supposed to just keep quiet. So they dominate the field. And we cannot go there and tell them, no, stop. Yes.
Well, I memean, I know Emeka's got some questions. But before he jumps in, can I pose a question on that point in particular? You bring up zoning. But isn't there a sense in which the ruling elite have actually had a conversation on ethnic terms and agreed to do zoning? I mean, when you say that we've not had a conversation, I mean,
Yes.
there's a sense in which that conversation has happened amongst the ruling elites. Like if you look at any of the main political parties, they are pluralist from an ethnic standpoint now. So, I mean, one could argue that the ruling elite have accommodated their fellow elite from every ethnic group, but the people who are not benefiting are the people at the bottom of the ladder, who form, in a sense, their own ethnic group. So, I mean, I think this is probably in line with the sort of question Emeka was ready to pose, but it's possible that he's been cut out at the moment. So I just wonder how you respond to the sense that at the elite level, there is...
I hear you.
Okay. It sounds like he's back. But Comrade, maybe you want to try tackling that first before he comes back in.
So Said, I think the issue here is even the premise, because even though I don't necessarily live in Nigeria, I spend a lot of time there. I know the political leadership, especially from Akwa Ibom. And I can tell you this, I am not aware of any ruling elite in Akwa Ibom that agreed to any zoning. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you this so you know. When they were writing that Abacha constitution, I come to Nigeria a lot. In fact, in those days, I'll come maybe twice a year. I remember coming, I remember Senator Anito Okon was part of the people that represented Akwa Ibom in that thing. They were not asked. It was imposed on them. They were unhappy. In fact, this is before even the constitution was completed. I sat down in a hotel in Lagos and he was going over this thing with some other people, and I could see they were like, oh, they have these geopolitical zones. They won't let us go say something. We don't want to be south of the geopolitical zone. They have no voice. I can say to you that today, I know this for a fact, and I'm sure it's not Akwa Ibom alone. If it was only Akwa Ibom, well, whatever. I can't speak for anybody else, but I know that for Akwa Ibom, we never, our ruling elite, I know all of them by name. I know all of them personally. I know Victor Atta. I know the people that wrote that constitution because I'm interested in this stuff. I'll call by phone when I arrive. I'll go and meet them. I'll talk to them. The so-called the ruling elite thing that you're saying, I can tell you that the ruling elite in Akwa Ibom never agreed to geopolitical zoning. They never. They thought the way that zoning thing was constructed would essentially put them in a situation where even the money that they will normally go and share, they will receive less. I can tell you that. So, they don't feel the ruling elite, not the ordinary people, because it does not really matter. All of this zoning thing is for these people to, increase their salaries, allowances, ride around in private jets. I get that. But it is important too that we note this is not just them. There are some ruling elites in the country that were shortchanged because we challenged them. We said, okay, your system is not working for us. And they were like, no, we never did any of these things. And Anita reminds me, remember when you came, I told you, they were deciding what needs to happen.
I mean, Emeka Novex, let me just fire a quick follow-up. I mean, so zoning is one of the various kinds of institutions, if you want to call it, that the elites at the national level have devised to accommodate ethnic difference and prevent another kind of civil war. But I think aside from zoning, another major one, in fact, a probably more pronounced one, is ethnic federalism, right? Or, what we call states, whereby, the country is now subdivided more or less along ethnic lines. And we have these subnational federating units with their own governors. So if zoning doesn't accommodate the elites in Akwa Ibom, don't you think them having, Akwa Ibom having its own state creates a platform for Akwa Ibom's ethnic elite, so to speak, to participate in ruling? And if that's the case, then why isn't that, what do you think are the issues with that? Doesn't that sufficiently respond to the demands for self-determination framed on an ethnic basis? Okay, Emeka, I'll keep quiet. Over to you, Comrade, and then I'll let Emeka go.
Okay, so I can answer the question?
Yes, please.
Yes, so what I'm going to convey to you is the thinking of Akwa Ibom people. That is their thinking. I am not boasting here, but I feel that today I reflect the thinking of Akwa Ibom people more than Udom Emmanuel, the governor. I reflect the thinking. I know this for a fact. We've tested it. I will say to you this. So you really know how Akwa Ibom people think. Okay, federalism. Really? I remember in those days, I was actually a consultant to Victor Tar. I'm sorry, to Goswell Akpabio. He hired me. In fact, he hired me and some other Americans, and we came to look at stuff in Akwa Ibom. And we did some research and all these kind of things in Akwa Ibom. During that period, there was a lot of kidnapping, tons of kidnapping. In fact, people were scared. I was interviewed on radio in Akwa Ibom where I was asked, Professor, you leave America to come here. They're kidnapping people. And I spoke with Goswell Akpabio one-on-one. I said, why don't you do something to do this? He was like, really? I have no police force. I have no security abilities. I have provided millions and millions of dollars to the police chief. That's what he said. I'm not going to say what I think about that. I know that police chief, he ate that money in New York. But the thing is this, he had what type of federalism is that? Where you are the governor of New York State, you have no ability to enforce law, zero. Somebody is there in Akwa Ibom, you say he's the Inspector General of Police, who is sent there at the whim and caprices of the Inspector General, some guy all the way in Abuja. Is the one now that sends this commissioner who comes here, collects money from the governor so that the governor will come down, and he sits there and they're kidnapping people. The governor cannot do anything. People were blaming the governor. I remember defending governor in those days. People criticized me. They said, oh, you are defending him just because he gave you a consultancy, which was not true. The thing is that the governor had no ability to stop kidnapping in Akwa Ibom State. He had zero. That's number one. I don't know anybody who runs anything. I have been dean of faculty before. I can imagine someone says to me, you know what, you are dean, but you cannot control the money. You can't control anything. You are just dean by mouth. Because I believe in accountability. Those governors have zero power. Zero. In terms of security. That's number one. That's one grievance people have in Akwa Ibom. That in terms of their own very security, they have to depend on one guy. In a country of 200 and something million. So they have to depend on this one guy who sits down there in Abuja. Number two, in terms of how Akwa Ibom people feel, because remember, Akwa Ibom, in Uyo, we have close to 80% undergraduate employment. Somebody will say to me, well, that's a national thing. I agree. But remember, I'm talking about Uyo here. I'm not saying these things don't happen anywhere else. In Uyo, I go to Uyo. I cannot believe, because I was working there, I did an audit of the 45 general hospitals and 287 medical centers in the state. I went everywhere for a period of about 4 or 5 years, and I could see no graduate has a job. I go to Ibno, where the oil is produced in the country. I see children swimming in oil-infested waters, and I talk to people. How do you think those people are going to feel? Remember, these are real people. Yeah. I'm not talking about going to the Senate and making noise, or going to This Day and having these fancy articles, or going to channels and saying stuff. I'm talking about something I saw. It pained me so much that I came back to New York here and organized on my own personal level eye screenings for everybody in that particular oil producing area, which is 5 local governments. So when I go there, the Akwa Ibom people then say, wait a minute, we produce 500,000 barrels of oil. So no matter how bad the country is, no matter how brotherly we should be with others, we should not be having this. I'm giving you the second grievance of Akwa Ibom people. The third grievance, for example, and I'm sure this is reflected a lot in other states. I think this reflected even maybe more than Akwa Ibom. So remember when I was running for Senate? I was running for Senate. I went to Akwa Ibom. Victor Tar picked me to come run for Senate. There were 2 or 3 of us he picked. I was running for Senate. I took a leave of absence for 1 year from my job from New York. I came there. I was told in very blunt language, you won't be senator. You don't talk to Babangida. You don't talk to this, you don't talk to that. And I realized, maybe it's because I came from the US, where you want to be senator in New York. It's New York. You don't need to talk to nobody in Washington, D.C., because what's going to end up happening is that when you get elected, you will be doing things for people in Washington, D.C., for the guy who appointed you. That system did not work to me. I remembered I was actually the favorite candidate.
I would just say, I think it's a good idea to talk to the DNC if you want to run as a Democrat in New York or anywhere.
That is correct. That is correct. No.
Or at least, yeah.
No problem.
About American politics. America wants to interrupt. Sorry.
Oh, let me. Okay. This is really nice because I think that part of what we intended to do with this is to have some sort of intergenerational conversation of the sort that we wouldn't. It's not something that you readily come across. When you. I mean, that's my own impression. So I've listened to I've been paying attention and listening to Prof. You respond to sides question, OAG's questions, and but I can't help but shake off this feeling, this feeling of suspicion that that not many members of the Nigerian left, listening to you. I think that they would largely disagree strongly with your position on the national question, especially because I mean, and you admit it yourself. It's what you're describing here is not peculiar to Akwa Ibom. It's not peculiar to Calabar. It's not peculiar to River State. I mean, and I'm being I'm choosing these states because they're the southern states. It's probably the same grievance that people from the southeastern part of Nigeria had, and which led to Biafra. So so this is perhaps a multi-layered question. It's not one. It's probably two. So I wonder. I mean, how you'd respond to. I don't see an Edwin Madnagbu agreeing with your position, for instance. I mean, or Biodu Jaifo. I wonder how you'd respond to these disagreements within the Nigerian left. Yeah, which if except I'm told otherwise, is one of your constituencies. And I pose this question, bearing in mind, that Curtis Joseph is the first Nigerian to win the Lenin Peace Prize. I was privileged to do some research about him, maybe a year or two ago, and he felt very strongly, that Nigerian Marxists were incapable of averting, the civil war because ethnic and leftist opportunism blurred their reasoning. Don't you think that this is a charge, considering the position that you're taking or that you have begun to take, recently, that this is a charge, that can be laid against you, by your own comrades?
Yes, I welcome that charge. I think it's a heartfelt one. I still remember my first time I came from my first holiday from Soviet Union. I went to see Escotoyo and was like, wow, how is the El Dorado going on? You must have really, really loved it. You must have had a lot of fun there. And I said, my first sentence was, there's more tribalism there, comrade, than here. And that stopped him in his tracks. But let me quickly answer your question. Yes, I think the thing is, maybe it's because of my life in general. I had always believed in action. I am not a theorist. I am happy that I have theory to guide me, but I'm not a theorist. I don't believe in talking about theory forever. I feel that something needs to be done. I would rather be wrong in moving something. Let me give you a quick example. I went to visit Russia just a few short years ago. And I had not been there for a while, and I went there. Actually, I had not been there. No, that was my second visit. The first visit, since Soviet Union broke up. So I went to visit. And I was surprised. When I arrived in Moscow, my classmates had a reception for me. My classmates were people from Estonia, from Lithuania, from Tajikistan, from all these places. A lot of them flew to Moscow. And I found something interesting. They were all still friends. They were all still comrades. And they came to welcome me. What I'm describing to you is this, that they're comrades. So if they sat there in Soviet Union and killed each other in the name of their ideology, what would have been the point? Right now, they are in these countries. They're still friends. I mean, they came to Moscow. As a matter of fact, I will tell you this. My university where I studied, the vice chancellor of my university is from Lithuania. He never went to Lithuania. He stayed there. In fact, he became a minister of higher education. So to me, there's the bigger political struggle to help our people. Then there's the ideological theory, which never seems to move anything. And that is my own disappointment. I will tell my comrades, I left how many, what have you guys done? I feel that I have a right to challenge them. I at least have come up with something. I would rather have Igbo People Republic and Emeka, and I come and visit you in Nigeria. We are still comrades, but you have an opportunity to see how Igbo People's Republic works. Unfortunately, I don't know, maybe fortunately, I have actually seen these things happen in real life, not theory. I asked my comrades, I would ask those comrades that you mentioned, Biodu Joyofo, I would ask them to tell me what more theory do we need? Okay, they will say to, well, look at how Nigeria is, we can't do it. So we're all talking. At some point, you have to break the pot. At some point, you have to think outside the box. So that if people really want to do something, I say to people, my thing is this. The question of Nigeria being one or not is not the issue with me. The issue is that the ordinary man gets the benefit of being a citizen. I don't care why I do that, as long as I'll do it. But what I will not do, though, is to sit around Nigeria and wait for God. Wait and wait. That's what our comrades are doing. I'm sorry. I wish they could tell me I'm wrong. Oh, yeah, I'm wrong in theory. But what does it really mean? It means that we are afraid, essentially, to think outside the box. This is my outside the box. Let somebody else, though, one of my comrades, give me a solution. I don't mean a solution next week. Because if I was going and hiding in the bush in those days to overthrow a government, somebody cannot tell me 40 years later that I should keep waiting.
Sorry, Prof. I mean, listening to you, I can't help, but think about it, especially because, in passing, these are some of, you've dropped hints, as to, but maybe not explicitly. But if you'd be more conversant with, this, more knowledgeable about this, given the time that you spent in the old Soviet Union. So I'm wondering, let's forget about the 1920s. So not necessarily forget about, but let's put it aside for now. 1917, 1918, after the Russian Revolution, and the Bolsheviks taking over, and the first time I think the Baltic states itself, left, the Russian, the old USSR. Let's fast forward right, into the time when you were resident in and I suspect that this was under Gorbachev. Correct me if
I came in under Brezhnev.
Okay, but
and I lived right through to Gorbachev.
All right, but so the spirit that I'm concerned with, that concerns me now is that period between 88 and 91. It doesn't strike me as though Gorbachev, that the left or whatever it was left of it, in the old Russian, old USSR, even within, nation states, like Ukraine itself, even the Baltic states, did much in terms of how they impacted on the breakup. The people who would say that was an own goal by Gorbachev, and I'm speaking specifically about that era of stagnation and what he tried to do in that period. So I don't know that And while I believe that yours is a fair criticism, and it's something, so to say that I haven't thought about it myself would be to lie, because even from my own observations, the fact that what constitutes the Nigerian left today, is largely made up of minorities themselves, what we call ethnic minorities in this country, the Igbo people, the how do you say it, Ishekiri, people can go on and on and on. But I mean, I don't know if this is totally different from the first question that I posed, but how would you respond to that, charge of ethnic opportunism, being, the left's biggest weakness, especially, and let me just chip this in, especially because this is coming from you, somebody who is from, Akwa Ibom, where, like you mentioned earlier, and there's a bit of oil. So isn't there any resource control? I mean, some people will question the genuineness, or is it genuinity of the motives? I mean, and this is within the left, because I know how charged these debates can be. How would you really respond, to that, given the context within which I just painted?
Okay, so for me, at the end of the day, as I said, at the end of the day, I want to go to sleep at night thinking that I've done things for the masses. This is the thing for me. We talked about the breakup that you were talking about. One of my classmates became Minister of Health in Lithuania, and he sent me numbers to show that child expectancy in Lithuania was higher than in former Soviet Union, because the Lithuanians were dismissed.
But the Lithuania is in the Baltics, right? I mean, but yeah, but I mean, I think it would be proper. I mean, I'm not preempting you, but I mean, to say that the old Soviet Union broke into more than three Baltic states. It did break up into about 15 or and
it did break up into several. And do you know the interesting thing? Even Gorbachev, because they refused to address this ethnic nationalities issue. You talked about stagnation. Have you noticed, to Gorbachev, them, it was an economic issue. Let's just move the economy for everybody. They made a mistake. They made a mistake of confusing the forest with the trees. This is my thing when it actually comes to what Gorbachev them did in those days.
They couldn't see the tree from the forest.
Yes, sir. They could not see the tree from the forest. That would have been very, very, very helpful. By the way, the thing you talked about, the oil thing, let me say this to you. If Nigeria was a true federation, if Nigeria was a federation, not like Soviet Union, what Nigeria needed to have done would be that guy swimming in that oil infested Ibano, it should not happen. That person from Zamfara, where the number of people taking jam, should not happen. It should be a national issue. It should be anywhere there's a problem in the country as a nation should be able to fix it. Because if you don't fix it, that's where you're going to have these ethnic differences. If you say to people, the opportunism of what? The government is opportunistic by ignoring Maiduguri, where I've traveled to many, many times. The governor is being opportunistic where where how many? Is it 20 people? I may be wrong. Feel free to correct me. Is it 20 or 40 people? I don't know, take jam from a whole state. That is an indictment on the Nigerian state. It's not about the fact that people are from Maiduguri. I was just using the old thing because that's what I see. If the country had fixed it so that those children swimming in infested waters would not have to swim there, what is my own? Solve all the problems. But I feel it's impossible. The Soviet Union tried to solve all the problems.
Yeah, but I mean, and this is me. So this is my own opinion, and I'm not saying that I speak for Saeed or Wage, but I speak for myself here when I say that I'd rather approach this using class and not ethnicity. And this is perhaps my own big critique of the left. We make this distinction between the left and the right, even in Nigeria. But if we drill down a bit, it's clear to us that we're all bourgeoisie in a certain sense. The only difference is how we envision our worldviews, and because when you spoke earlier on of Badi Onimode, the people, this is when Talakawas in that sense. These are guys who also had some pedigree. Wale Soyinka, prominent families from Abeokuta. Even just listening to you talk, your own parents were a bit well-to-do. You sound to me like you come from a place of some kind of privilege. So I don't know. It's for me. It's more of a class thing, and even I who I'm talking, I'm conscious of the fact that I have it better than my peers. But I'll tell you something. I wouldn't assume to speak for the whole of Wawa people. In Enugu State, which is where I come from. Because um, I can only talk about it in terms of class. But to say that I, it's an ethnic thing, because across ethnic divides, you have people who live, that social matrix for people living below poverty, straddles all of these ethnicities, if you ask me. I mean, so maybe where I'm going with this is to even ask, do you still describe yourself as a socialist? And I ask because I'm curious, because I mean, if tomorrow, your wish for an Ibom nation, were to become a reality, how do you imagine that the social, economic, and political life of that society would be structured? Do you see the fate? Do you see do you see the fate of the Ibom nation resembling that of the Baltic countries, or countries like Moldova, Kazakhstan, I think you mentioned, or even Ukraine itself? Because I think that's where the ball drops. We can splinter into 450 ethnic groups tomorrow, but what becomes our fate? Is this something that we're thinking about now in making all of these agitations?
So I am, as you can imagine, Soviet broke up into 15 countries. When I lived there, there was talk that, it's too tiny. How can you break up into this? Let's do it in groups, right? Let's all of the Baltics go form one country. All of that talk is well and good. If you watch the Olympics, some country will match with less than 1 million. The issue is not the numbers. The numbers of how many countries will break into, I've heard a lot, break into a million, into villages. That to me is good talk. However, the reality is that for me, I'll repeat, you talked about the class. Yes, of course, that we.
Yeah, but Ukraine is easily 70 million, today. I mean, so even in terms of size,
the problem in Ukraine, as I said, is between Ukrainians and Russians there. But I don't want to use Ukraine. Let's use the Baltics. Let's use other places which is relatively successful after Soviet Union broke up. We can talk about Ukraine. The problem with Ukraine.
How about the unsuccessful ones?
They're clearly unsuccessful ones. Those unsuccessful ones, however, if you go and look at it, it is because people are not allowed their self-determination in those places. That's my opinion with the unsuccessful ones. But back to Nigeria, though, what I'm trying to say is this. Because you asked me, do you still consider yourself a socialist? Do you still think about the fact that our real problem is class differences? It is. But so what? It's almost like me as a physician. You're saying to me that the diagnosis that I feel, the etiology of COVID-19, right, is a particular virus. I can know that virus all I want, but if I don't get to treatment, if I don't look for ways around it, all I know is a virus. Of course it is a virus. Of course it is class differences. That is not, for me, that is not news. What is news is that at some point, something needs to be done to move people forward. I am confident that in Igbo People's Republic, because of my own personal ideology, by the way, we've written about this, we have a list of what we want to do. In Igbo People's Republic, for example, I do not expect a single person to go hungry. Not one. We will have policies that address the masses, the interests of the masses. We would have policies that are essentially socialist policies if you really want to get down to it. Now, you could say, because one thing I've realized, my brother Emeka, one thing I've realized, if you don't have political power, you can talk all you want. You can say anything you want. The problem is, do we still want political power? So if those comrades say to me, I'm a socialist, am I still a socialist? I ask them, do you still want political power? Do you? Because what I notice among a lot of my comrades, they just want to talk and let's not offend anybody, let's not say things that are wrong. I feel that I am almost confident that with the Igbo People Republic, the rest of Nigeria will copy what we are doing because we're going to run a people's government. That is why it is called Igbo People's Republic. We have no plans to run what we saw in Nigeria, the way Nigeria is being run. I will frown seriously if we have a class issue in Igbo People Republic. I cannot do all of this in my life to go and be part of this system where you have this type of class differences. So for me, I feel that I can do this with the small Igbo People Republic, whatever we are, and others will copy. I don't know why that you could call it, but I could also do the opposite. I could also sit there with my comrades. Let's talk about class differences. In Nigeria where we have no power, we have zero political power. Have you thought about that? How are we going to implement our ideology without power? In those days when we were kids, we go run around trying to see where we can get power. Of course, they arrested all these Edimadunagos 10 times a week, and they tried their best. But I really feel in the context that we are now in Nigeria, something else needs to be looked at. Something else needs to be looked at. If we want to say, okay, let all of us come back, it's not by force. We can always come.
I know that you, Prof, I mean, I can't talk about the medical profession, but use a term like diagnosis. I mean, would you say that it would be unfair to think or for anyone to lay the charge at you personally, that you're shirking work? Or, I mean, because say I go to University of Ibadan, for instance, and I sit down with a few people who identify as socialists, and part of the conversation is always a big critique of the left about even ASU, for instance. So I heard you respond to, I think it was Saeed, or was it OAG, about the Ali Moscow thing in terms of ideology and all of that. But I know, I mean, from just researching, and by the way, I mean, I kind of worked on the Olaoni thing for a bit, so I kind of have a fair bit of idea what he did as a lecturer in the University of Ibadan, especially within around the Ali Moscow episode, and I think that it would be uncharitable to say that these guys haven't put in, the work. If I remember correctly, as of 1978, it wasn't even called ASU. It was called AUT. I think it was called the Association of University Teachers. But my bigger critique of all of this is that even from the academics to people like you, to people like me, to people like Said, we all belong to the class that we most criticize, right? I think that we haven't forged the link with, the people, which is why I'll be very slow to want to assume that I am speaking for, because when you say that the Ibom nation, I'm not very versed with Akwa Ibom. I have barely done 2 nights in Akwa Ibom. Yeah, sorry. But I know that the Akwa Ibom, as it were, will be predominantly made up of the Anang people, the Abak people, maybe the Ibom people. I'm not sure how it works, But where I come from, it's when these things break down, then they keep on breaking down. So into very to smaller.
Can you give me historical examples of this breakdown? Because we have historical examples. We can name them: the past 10 years, the past 20, the past 30. I have not seen that continually breaking down.
Yeah, but
Give me a specific historical example.
Yeah, but it might not be. I mean, it probably would even be breakdown. But we've had wars. We've had wars in Nigeria here between the Ife and the Modakeke people, who probably you would think are essentially the same people. Even in Nigeria, you'd had the Kiriti Parakbo wars. All sorts of different wars. So
And I
it's
mean,
it's
Emeka, if you don't mind me jumping in, I would also say that even within the context of the flawed federalist system that we have in Nigeria, you still have constant demands for the creation of more states on these same
Jebu
ethnic basis.
Nation.
Yeah, in Benue, you have demands by the Domas to create their own state. When there was the national conference under Jonathan, one of the resolutions that came out of it was the creation of, I think, 18 more states on ethnic lines. So, I mean, but Emeka, if you don't mind, I'll summarize maybe what I think is a question emerging in your response, also so that we can let Comrade go. We've now been here for a bit of time. So maybe I can phrase them in these two ways, Prof. In an attempt to try to get us to wrap up. So the first is, how do you reconcile ultimately this agitation with the implicit balance of class forces in Akwa Ibom society as it currently stands? So that includes, as Emeka is so keen to point out, that includes people like us and you, but that includes the actual elite in power in Akwa Ibom at the moment, including the governors and past and present, people who are in the National House of Representatives and the existing elite. I mean, how would they?
Like, what role do they play in this framework?
Exactly. How open would they be to sacrificing their current economic and social status for a socialist People's Republic? I mean, would that just automatically happen on the basis of them sharing the same ethnicity, or would there need to be a further revolutionary struggle to accomplish that? So I'd be curious to hear about, just in practical terms, how you see the class question being resolved internally, because it strikes me as though just the breakup of, or the independence of the Akwa Ibom as a singular national entity wouldn't necessarily immediately resolve those questions on its own. And then, if I could tack on another one, what do you make of Pan-Africanism as a vision? I mean, does that sound to you like just another bunch of theory that seems kind of beyond the pale at this point, or do you think there's a pathway from having the example of an Akwa Ibom, an independent republic of what is currently Akwa Ibom, and maybe the other states following the example, as you said, might occur? Do you see a pathway from that back to Pan-Africanism, or does that vision no longer inspire you because maybe of the kind of distance perhaps from the realities that you're describing? I don't know how you might respond to these questions.
Okay, so let me answer the two questions. So let me start from the last one, the Pan-Africanism. Yes, I feel that Pan-Africanism is one by one by one. One thing, you do it right, then the next second nation does it right, the third nation does it right. Not the Pan-Africanism of Kwame Nkrumah.
Of Kwame Nkrumah.
Not that part. The Pan-Africanism, I believe, is you have a Rwanda, you have an Igbo People's Republic. You build the Pan-Africanism from the strength. You have to be strong. That will make it easier to build the Pan-Africanism. That's my response to that. The second part, when you talked about the elite in Akwa Ibom State, I don't know of a single person elected in Akwa Ibom who was elected in a free and fair election. None. I can tell you this because I've contested election. I've actually contested election, and I know that the voting there is thoroughly rigged from the beginning to the end. In fact, so I don't think those people represent Akwa Ibom. The real Akwa Ibomers that you're thinking about, they do not. I promise you.
Surely those people have power, because to be able to win even crookedly requires some kind of
mobilize political, resources to get there.
And economic, I presume.
Chung, the president of North Korea has power. I don't know what that power is. So anybody can have power. If you have a gun and you suppress people, impose a constitution on them, of course you can create power centers. That is not the point. The point is this, and I'm telling you, but this is me though. This is me. Having been around Akwa Ibom, I think the mistake the governor made was to give me that assignment. It allowed me to go to 31 local governments in Akwa Ibom. Think about this, 273 healthcare centers in the whole state. Akwa Ibom is a small state. I was able to see people. I was able to talk to people one-on-one. They do not respect any of those people. They don't get, they get paid money. Recently, they gave 5,000 naira in a stadium. They are not legitimate representatives. First of all, they are operating on a constitution that nobody in Akwa Ibom wrote. But what do you want the elites to do in Akwa Ibom? They're greedy elites, though. So they will follow anything just to get some money and become second-class elites in Nigeria. I'm telling you, this is the sentiments of Akwa Ibom, not me. If I did not go to Akwa Ibom to do all of this, I'll be talking differently today, because I will not know it to that level. I would, okay, whatever, as you said, since they've been that strong, let's recognize them, since they've been able to acquire power in this sophisticated mechanism that they call election. But unfortunately for them, I know people at the grassroots people. You mentioned about our relationship with people. I feel that my organization, Ibom People's Movement, has a stronger relationship with ordinary people in Akwa Ibom. I am confident, not the elites, not the idea, I don't know what we mean by elite here anymore, because of course you can say, okay, I came from a family where my parents did very, very well. But the same parents that I had when Obasanjo arrested me, they went to arrest my father too, who was a permanent secretary. So I don't know how I benefit from that in that sense. But the point is here that my own connection is directly with 9 million ordinary Akwa Ibom people. The elites you see there in Abuja, I have no respect for them. I can be blunt to you. Our people have no respect for them. They're afraid of them. Yes, this is what I want to remove. I want to remove that fear from the ordinary person who don't have a job. I'm not interested in what the elites are getting. They're greedy people. They're driving around in these big fat cars with mopol. What type of life is that? And I'm talking socialism. I'm talking class differences. When I see a man who has zero talent, has no profession, is driving around with 10 mopo guarding him in a motorcade, that offends my sensibility. Look, if I cannot overcome that, then let somebody come and talk to me about being a socialist after that. Because I want you to challenge that too, not by talk. I am posing a real challenge to them. You talk about traditional rulers. Traditional rulers in Akwa Ibom have spoken to me. Luckily, we have traditional rulers who have PhDs today, who have privately had long discussions with me. I'm sorry. If we pose our struggle correctly, I feel we can win here. Again, I'll repeat, if we win, all of you will win. All of my comrades will win, because we'll have an opportunity to create something which none of my comrades have today. My comrades are sitting at home and wondering, oh, you are an ethnic opportunist. Ethnic opportunist? It is the bourgeoisie who brought ethnicity to Nigeria. And we cannot refuse to address it by saying, I don't want to labor, we need to point it out. At least I want to point it out. I feel that our strength is to point it out. So to me, I am confident of what we're doing, and I think we will be good.
Rob, thank you so much for your time. And thank you so much for these very candid responses. We might not have agreed on everything, but I really appreciated, and I'm sure the co-host will say the same, this opportunity to engage with you. And I really hope that we get the opportunity to do so again, perhaps to delve deeper into these issues, but also perhaps reflect on the history of the left in Nigeria and how we got where we are. So just for myself and on behalf of Mecca, who invited you, and OAG, just want to say a huge thank you for making the time to chat with us this evening. And yeah, I hope we get to talk again.
Thank you. I wish you guys the best. Emeka has said that sometimes there's some levity or a little bit of fun. I'm surprised I was not as fun as I would have loved to be. But I appreciate all of you. I appreciate you for challenging me. This is very important, and I'm very grateful that I was able to talk with you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, thanks very much, sir.
And trust me, and I think that I appreciate what you're doing, because if nothing else, you're forcing us to have that conversation within the left, and I think it's
very
important. And
Very important.
I totally agree on that. Even if we disagree on the nitty gritty of it, I am 100% for addressing. We can't be chasing the bourgeoisies with our tails in between our legs. We need to set the pace. So and conversations like this over time would and reach us. That's what I think about this.
Yeah. Totally agree.
To just add to that, I think sorry, I think it will morph into some sort of pathway that we can chart for a form of action, and something that would make us have a concrete solution to the myriad of problems that I have on ground. So it's been really educative, and I've learned when he was describing the action, and things that he did in school, it was like a movie, and we talked about the student union episode, which we'll probably expand on more, so it's really interesting and helpful.
Yeah, completely agree. And Prof, we'll have to
thank
have you
you.
back
So
on.
by the way, I use Spotify to listen to music. This is the first time I listen to a podcast on Spotify. You guys have put a thought into my head. Maybe I should do a podcast.
That'd be good. That'd be good.
Well,
let us know. Let us know when you get around to doing it.
I will.
Had an impact.
That
happens.
Yeah.
Thanks again, Prof. And so we'll be in touch soon with the recording. Maybe we'll give you an opportunity to listen to it as well.
Thank you.
And then we'll put it out shortly thereafter. But yeah, once again, we'll hopefully get in touch with you again, and maybe get a chance to talk about slightly more lighthearted subjects. For instance, the cuisine in the Soviet Union. And
so I have hours upon hours of
Soviet stories.
All right, you might regret having informed us about that. Excellent. All right. So we'll let you go then.
Comrades, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, Comrade.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.
Yeah.
Talk soon.
All right.